Hi, and welcome to That's Ready Mysterious. Join me for an intriguing look into real-life mysteries. Who was the mad gasser of Mattoon? What was whaling at the Wilga waterhole? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about the Battle of Los Angeles. The day after the battle, the New York Times wrote, "Residents from Santa Monica southward to Long Beach, covering a 39-mile arc, watched from rooftops, hills, and beaches as tracer bullets with golden yellowish tints and shells like skyrockets offered the first real show of the Second World War on the United States mainland." The attack on Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941. In that attack, 2,403 Americans died. Following the attack, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, asked Congress to declare war and joined the Allied powers. It made sense then that the following months were a tense time in the United States. On December 9, 1941, there were reports of enemy aircraft approaching New York City. These reports ended up being unconfirmed. However, they caused a panic in New York City and the stock market tumbled. On December 23, 1941, Japanese submarines sank the oil tanker Montebello off the coast of California, firing 13 shots. Then, on December 24th, Japanese submarines attacked the lumber ship SS Absaroka. The Secretary of War, Harry L. Stimson, warned cities in the United States to be prepared to deal with occasional blows from the enemy. Just a few days later, on February 23, 1942, the cruiser submarine I-17 entered Santa Barbara Channel and fired on Wellwood oil field. Historian Mark Felton said of the attack, "It was a real pinprick attack with highly inaccurate gunfire. They only fired between 16 and 24 shells and actually missed a very huge petrol container that would have caused major damage. Thankfully, the attack only caused a little bit of damage and there were no casualties." It still took a mental toll, however. Felton explained that it created a mass panic on the California coast because it was the first time that the Japanese had actually been able to hit the continental United States. He continued that the attack happening in the middle of the night just added to the panic. At that time, the US didn't have the ability to send aircraft to deal with an attack because they didn't have any radar. It made the coastal area feel vulnerable. On February 24, 1942, naval intelligence told units on the California coast to prepare for a potential attack by the Japanese. On February 25th, that attack happened. The Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, began around 2 a.m. when the new coastal radar found a blip. An unidentified aerial target was about 120 miles, or about 193 kilometers west of Los Angeles, and headed for the city. Around 2:15 a.m., 2 more radar sites confirmed the object. The military put spotlights onto the object. At 2:25 a.m., Los Angeles air raid sirens started going off and a blackout was ordered across the city, although not many complied with the blackout. Then the shooting started. At 3 a.m., an unidentified object, or objects, were discovered off the coast of Santa Monica. Anti-aircraft were ordered to shoot on sight. At 3:07 a.m., the anti-aircraft in Santa Monica began firing into the sky, and soon Los Angeles joined in. Civilians and gunners from the Army reported seeing an enemy aircraft, falling bombs, and even Japanese paratroopers. There was a report of a Japanese aircraft crashing in Hollywood. The shooting finally ceased around 3:30 a.m. In the end, more than 1,400 rounds of ammunition were fired. Following the battle, Coastal Artillery Corps Colonel John G. Murphy wrote, "Imagination could have easily disclosed many shapes in the sky in the midst of that weird symphony of noise and color. But cold detachment disclosed no planes of any type in the sky, friendly or enemy." Meanwhile, coastal artilleryman Charles Patrick wrote that he could barely see the planes, but that he was sure that they were up there. He said that he could see 6 planes and that shells were exploding all around them. There was structural damage on the ground, all due to friendly fire. It was caused by shells that didn't explode in the air, but instead exploded once they hit the ground. By 7:21 a.m., the Regional Warning Center issued an all-clear. Although there is no proof there were ever any enemy aircraft in the air over coastal California, there were 5 fatalities due to the Battle of Los Angeles. 3 people died in car accidents that were a result of the blackout. 2 people died of heart attacks caused by shock during the raid. Although the military had fired more than 1,400 rounds, not one of them hit an aircraft because there were no aircraft to hit. Embarrassed by the incident, authorities arrested 20 Japanese Americans for trying to signal the enemy aircraft, which never existed. That was the beginning of the internment of Japanese Americans in the United States. Immediately following the incident, the U.S. Navy and U.S. Army disagreed about what had happened. Stimson initially said that as many as 15 commercial aircraft piloted by the Japanese had flown over Los Angeles. No one believed him, but everyone agreed it was better to be safe than sorry. Stimson later retracted his claim. Navy Secretary Frank Knox said that the whole event was a false alarm, which he attributed to jittery nerves. The Battle of Los Angeles happened just days after FDR signed Executive Order 9066, which authorized the internment of Japanese Americans. Felton explained that before the raid there was a lot of suspicion of Japanese Americans, and when the LAPD said that they were signaling the aircraft, it just increased the unease. There was absolutely no evidence of any enemy aircraft or soldiers ever found. The military had to admit that the air raid was a false alarm. It did, however, stimulate the city and the military. Arthur C. Verge, professor of history at El Camino College, explained that as bad as the battle was, he believed it was a wake-up call to the local residents. They had thought of the war as some faraway thing, only coming as close as the Hawaiian Islands, but the Battle of Los Angeles made it real and brought the war to them. The lack of evidence for an attack didn't prevent the military from declaring California, Washington, Oregon, and Arizona as 2 military zones, with one being where Japanese Americans were banned. The false alarm did play a part in the city's history, and today the city puts on annual reenactments of the raid. Stephen Nelson, director and curator of the Fort MacArthur Museum in San Pedro, California, said that the Battle of Los Angeles had basically been relegated to a footnote in history, but that he thinks it deserves to be held in higher regard than that. The Battle of Los Angeles was the only significant military action of the Second World War that occurred on U.S. soil. The Los Angeles Times wrote that at the end of the war, an Army document explained that weather balloons had been released in the area that night. The balloons carried lights so they could be tracked, and the balloons were silver. The combination of silver balloons and lights was enough to mistake them for enemy aircraft. Some people believe that they were not weather balloons, but instead they were UFOs. In the end, no cause has ever been definitively determined. In 1983, the Office of Air Force History did an investigation to determine the cause. They said that the U.S. military defenses were on high alert due to the recent attacks, and they mistook weather balloons for enemy aircraft. A March 1942 New York Times article wrote that as the world's foremost make-believer, Hollywood seems to have been the location of a battle that never happened. What happened during the Battle of Los Angeles? Did we fire on weather balloons? Or maybe we tried to shoot down aliens? What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. Join me next week for another captivating mystery.